Okay, we're going to look at a few more things now. Some little bits and pieces, and then we're going to look at images. Okay, how to include images in your page. It's possible to include comments in your HTML code. Now, for very short, very simple pages, it's not necessary. But later in the module, we'll be doing some quite complex things. And you may want comments just to remind you which pieces of code are doing what jobs. So if the layout is complex, it's a good idea to have comments. So you can make comments with open bracket, exclamation mark, dash, dash. Then you can say blah, 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 whatever you want. And then you close it off with dash, dash, close bracket. Also, if you have a piece of code, it's very common if you have a piece of code that you want to remove and put back in later, rather than copying it out, pasting it like cutting it out, pasting it somewhere, and then pasting it back in when you're done, you can comment it out, which means you turn it into a comment, and that has the effect of making it appear to not be there as far as the browser is concerned. You do that a lot in programming. You comment something out rather than remove it. When you look at HTML at the moment, you're probably just seeing tags, but eventually you'll see boxes. You'll see boxes inside boxes inside boxes, like Russian dolls. So you have a HTML box, and inside that there is a head box and a body box. And inside the head box is a title box. And inside the body box, you might have all these other boxes. You have boxes inside boxes inside boxes. And it's important that the tags reflect that nested structure. So here, for example, we have where we're turning on bold, and we're also turning on italics, because we want there and how to be in bold, but we want only how to be in italics. So what we've done here is we've said hi, we've the B tag to begin bold, we're saying there, so there is going to be in bold, fair enough. We have the I tag to turn on italics, and then we have how, so how is going to be both in bold and in italics. And next up here then we're turning off bold, and then we're turning off italics, but that's wrong. Okay? We have to close the I tag before we close the B tag. You might say it doesn't matter because we started bold and we started italics, and then we're ending bold, ending italics is the same as ending italics, ending bold. They both stop there, so what's the problem? But the structure must be properly nested. So generally, if you're closing a tag, you're closing the last one that was opened. It's not really allowed to close something now that was opened way back. You have to close all the other things you opened in the meantime, because it's boxes inside boxes inside boxes. So it's a bit like brackets, okay? You have different kinds of brackets. You have to, here we have opened a round bracket, opened a curly bracket, opened a square bracket. We can't close the roundy or the curly ones there until we close the square one. And so the tags act like brackets as well. So you can't put this B here and this I here. You have to close off the I first and then close off the B. Do you understand that? That's actually quite an important point. And looking at your faces, I don't think I've done a great job of explaining that. But it's quite important. So generally you can only close off the last thing you opened. You can't close now something that you opened way, way back and opened other things since. You can always open something, but really you're limited in what you can close. You can only close the thing you last opened, pretty much. And then you can close the thing you opened before that. And you can close the thing you opened before that. But there's this order. Okay? Here's some useful tags. Well, actually, they're not that useful, but if you're going to be doing maths, they're useful. So if I was giving this class to maths lecturers, they probably need these things. So sub is for sub, what do you call that again? Subscript and superscript. Okay, so you might see those on your travels. You might need them. It's unlikely that you would, but thought I'd show them anyway. Here's a useful one. You can put inside in the href, you can put in mail to and an email address. And then what will happen is when the person clicks on that, it will automatically crank up their mail application and the address will already be put in. You can even set it up so that the subject line is also automatically inserted. Now, because of the way your mail is set up at CIT, that won't work. You won't see that. But if you had a web page and you looked at it on your phone, for example, and you clicked on one of these mail to links, it would go straight into your email and the email address would already be there. So that's a very useful one, particularly in, say, a customer contact form. I mean, it's a huge difference between you saying, you can email us at this address, and you're expecting the person to click and copy and paste, copy, and then go into their mail program and paste that in. Or they can just click it and dink-de-doo, straight into their mail. It's half sent already. You just have to actually type the message. Okay, so that's a very useful one, particularly now that people, are using just their finger on their phones and stuff. So it's a big difference. If you're at a computer, copy and paste is no big deal. On a phone, it's more trouble. So that's a good one. But you might not see that working at CIT in these labs, just the way the email is set up. But you'd see it working at home all right, if you have your email set up properly. Now, what we're going to look at now is an image tag, how to include an image on a page. Okay, so I'm just going to change the order of these actually. In fact, I'm going to remove that altogether. It'll be better. So here's the structure of an image tag. IMG is the tag that we use, and that's how you include an image on a web page. And it has a number of different components. The most important one is the src attribute. So you see src equals, and you put in the path of the image. So it could be an absolute path. That's a bit unusual. It's more likely to be a relative path. So that's the file name of the image that you want to include on the page. You'll notice here that the image tag doesn't occur in begin-end pairs. It's one of those rare tags that doesn't occur in pairs. You don't begin an image and then end an image. You just have an image on the page. So we close off the image tag here with this slash at the end. And then there are two sets of attributes there now. There's the width and the height and the alt. The alt, well, first of all, the alt, width and height must be there for it to be correct. If they're not there, it's simply incorrect. But there's good reasons for them to be there as well. So alt is what would display if there was some problem with the image loading. So if the file name, if the path was incorrect, for example, in this case you just see a placeholder for the image and you'd see dog. But that's not why we do it. When the internet was really, really slow, it was actually possible to turn off the images altogether. So you'd go to a web page and you'd just see the text. And then if you wanted the images, you'd say to the browser, okay, go download that. It might take a minute or two. And so the alt tag was there to tell you what the image was about, and you could decide whether you actually wanted the image or not. We don't use it for that now either. That's not why we do it. Although if you had a situation where the internet, the connection was very, very slow, it would be useful still. It would say what the image was about before it actually arrived. You might see that. We use the alt tag because a machine might be reading the page rather than a human. So if you have a picture of a dog on a page, a human looking at that can see fairly quickly that it's a dog. A computer looking at the page can't actually recognize the image. You know, to get a computer to look at a bunch of pixels and say, is that a dog? What is that? That's not an easy thing to do. It's doable, but it actually requires an awful lot of processing. So to expect a browser to be able to do that, for example, is asking a lot. So the machine that's reading the page might be doing that, for example, on behalf of a blind person. I mean, blind people need to surf the web too, so they have programs that will read out to them the contents of the page. But when it comes to images, it can't look at an image and know what it is. But if you have in your alt tag an accurate description of what's in the image, their screen reader will be able to read that out to them. And then at least know in this case it's a picture of a dog. Now, depending on the context, dog might be enough, or it might be important for you to explain particularly what kind of dog and what the dog is doing. You know, does the dog have a ball in his mouth, whatever. So you want an accurate description of the image in the alt tag. For the most part, dog would not be enough. The computer reading your page might also be doing that on behalf of a search engine. So a search engine may have stumbled upon your page and wants to know what it's about, so it can classify it correctly, so it can index it, so that if people are looking for something like your website, it knows to send them to you. Again, it's impossible, not impossible, but impractical for a search engine bot to look inside the images that you have on your page. So all it has to go on are the descriptions you have in the alt tags of your images. So if this is a picture of a German Shepherd with a green ball in his mouth, and someone is looking for a web page that is something to do with German Shepherds, the search engine may be able to send them to your page. Whereas if it only had the text of your page to go on, maybe you made no mention of German Shepherds. So humans can look at your images and see what they are, but machines can't. So we use the alt tag to help machines that are looking at your page. And like I said, they may be doing that on behalf of a person who can't see well, or on behalf of a search engine. Now the width and the height then are also important. First of all, they're required, so you have to have them or it'll be incorrect. But there's a good reason to have them as well. So an image may have a natural width and height. So if you take a picture on an old phone, for example, it might be 800 by 600 pixels or something. Like 800 pixels wide, 600 pixels tall. If you take a photograph on, say, an iPhone 5, I don't know, it might be 3,000 pixels tall and maybe 4,000 pixels wide. It might have very high resolution. The width and the height attributes of the image tag tell the browser to resize the image to the size that you want. So you'll make it fit the page. So typically your image might be, anything smaller than 150 pixels would be very small. Anything bigger than 400 would be taking up a lot of the page. So as the author of the web page, you can specify the height at which and width, so the size that you want that image to be displayed at. And that's useful. And it doesn't have to be the natural size of the image. However, if you're deviating significantly from the natural size of the image, you need to think carefully about what you're doing and why you're doing that. So if you are displaying an image on your web page at 400 pixels by 400 pixels, okay? If the actual natural size of that image was only 40 pixels by 40 pixels, then it'll display it at 400 pixels by 400 pixels fine, but it'll look crap. You can't take an image that's 40 pixels by 40 pixels and blow it up and expect it's going to look good. If you take an image that's 4,000 pixels by 4,000 pixels and display it at 400 pixels by 400 pixels, it will look fine. It'll look great, in fact. But remember that when the browser gets the HTML and gets the link to the image, it has to go off to the server and get that image. You're asking the browser to download an image that's 4,000 pixels by 4,000 pixels, and then you're only going to display it at 400 by 400. The download time of that image is going to be roughly 100 times more what it needs to be. An image that's 4,000 pixels by 4,000 pixels isn't 10 times bigger than one that's 400 by 400. It's 100 times bigger. So in that same space, you could have downloaded 100 images on the web page. So it's going to look fine, but that's very inefficient. So you can resize the image dynamically in the browser and give it a different size from its natural size. But you have to think about, are you doing a good thing? So if it's small and you're making it bigger, it could look bad. If it's way big and you're making it small, you're being inefficient. So in the second situation, it makes more sense to resize the image, to open it up in an application that edits images. And if you know you're only going to ever display it at 400 by 400, then reduce the size down to 400 by 400 and download that every time. You must remember you're probably also paying per megabyte. So if you're asking people to download images that are 100 times bigger than they need to be, if your site becomes popular, it could ruin you, because you'd be paying 100 times more than you need to. So you could be paying, €100 a day for your hosting instead of €1. So those efficiency things need to be considered. So it is possible to scale it up or scale it down, but if you're going too far, maybe you need to rethink what you're doing. Okay? I can show you an example there. It's just a picture of a guy. So here we have an image, a soldier on the page, and if we look at the HTML, we said img src equals soldier.jpg, width equals whatever, height equals whatever, alt equals soldier. Now, depending on the context, soldier might be enough information, or he's Portuguese, that might be relevant or not. Okay. If I'm not mistaken, he's guarding the parliament. Any questions? So what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to include some images on your web page. Bear in mind now that the path is important. You're going to probably, you're definitely going to use relative paths. So you must be absolutely sure that you know the exact file name of the image so that you can reference it from the web page. So you can go to Google, download a few images. You find an image. If you click on an image, you can typically do right click, said the man with no mouse, and do save image as. And if it comes up with a really, really long name or something, you just call it photo1.jpg if you want, assuming it was a JPEG to begin with. Like I said, we only consider GIF, JPEG, and PNG to be standard formats. They're the only ones that are acceptable really for use in web pages. And even then, there are scenarios where PNG wouldn't be appropriate. You'd only use PNG if you're using it for some of its special properties that it has that the others don't. Otherwise, you should be using a JPEG or a GIF. Any questions? Okay, so we're going to tart up your pages something fierce now.